This is the Louie T Network. Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Dennis out and Tony Sperano out. Chat Del Rio in. Who else could it be? Put me, your me, Louie T. Welcome to this In the Lab Room special coaching search series. Up next, the Oakland Raiders. It's the attack of the silver and black, who hopefully are on their way back. First order of business this offseason, finding a new head coach. Despite last year being another down season for the Oakland Raiders, they're moving in the right direction. This train is finally going down the tracks in the right direction, and it starts up top with ownership and Mark Davis. I really like the way that this guy moves. I like the way he moves. Doom, doom, doom. I'm really starting to like the way that he operates. And remember this, the weak start riots, the strong move silent. And he is moving quietly and efficiently in ordering this Raiders ship to go in the right direction. Now, when I look at Mark Davis, I say to myself, why is it that he doesn't talk a lot? He isn't in front of the camera a whole bunch. He didn't give the dreaded vote of confidence. He's not one of these guys that oversteps his boundaries. He knows he's not a football guy at heart. And so he surrounds himself with the people that help him make smart decisions. I like the way that he does what it is he's doing, because he's doing it in a way that's going to allow this Raiders team to become relevant again. And it's going to take baby steps. And he's taking all of the small steps necessary to help this thing go in the right direction. The thing I like about him the most, however, is his loyalty. And that today is something that you find in small amounts around the National Football League. Not a lot of loyalty to coaches, to general managers. Ownership has become somewhat of a what have you done for me now business and operation. And owners in the National Football League are guys that love instant gratification. And so you'll see a coach come in. They already know, ownership knows that it's going to be a tough turnaround process. They know that it's not a get quick overnight fix. Yet, that's what they're looking for. They want immediate results. And so to see a guy like Mark Davis come in and realize that this is not going to be an overnight fix for whomever comes in here is refreshing. He could have gotten rid of Dennis Allen last offseason. No one would have batted an eye had he done so. In fact, I fully expected him to get fired because that's the way the Raiders have run their organization over the last decade and a half. However, he retained Dennis Allen's services last season, and he probably went into the season saying to himself, we've got an early bye. If we don't have this thing going the way that I want it to, if this team seems like they're starting to tune Dennis Allen out, if he's losing the locker room, I'll make a change then. After that London game when they were blown out by Miami, that's exactly what he did. The Raiders were winless. They weren't competitive in 3 or 4 of those losses that they had going into that bye week after the London loss, which was a blowout to the Dolphins. And he said, you know what, time to make a change. He brings in Tony Sperano, upgrades him from offensive line coach to head coach, which was the perfect move. It's exactly what this team needed at the time. He comes in, rights the ship. Raiders get big wins over teams that were either 500 or above 500 at season's end in San Francisco when they needed to have a win. They lost. The Bills had to win. Raiders were able to beat them. And also the Chiefs, their first win of the season, was a huge win over an AFC West opponent. So Raiders got it done in a couple of spots. And so I thought Tony Sparano did a great job, but Mark Davis did say something. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, it's profound. And he did say, I didn't have a hand in the head coaching search last time. That was all Reggie McKenzie. It didn't go over the way that I wanted it to. I'm going to make sure that I have my hand in this coaching search, and I'm going to make sure that I have the final say in who is the next Oakland Raiders head man. And I want a guy with a track record. I want a name. I want someone that I bring in here will be able to have a little bit of clout when deciding on who he will have to be his defensive coordinator, his offensive coordinator. I want a name that resonates around the league. So I knew that kind of ruled Tony Sparano out when talking about the next Oakland Raiders head coach. You also look at his loyalty and you say, Reggie McKenzie, he's been on the hot seat. A lot of people, or was he ever on the hot seat? You hear so many reports, you really don't know what to believe, but you never heard anything come out of the horse's mouth. You never heard Mark Davis say, hey, Reggie McKenzie is on the hot seat. You never heard a report that said Mark Davis felt that way. You just heard rumblings and grumblings that Reggie McKenzie could be on the hot seat. But what did Reggie McKenzie do last year? Everybody likes to harp on the free agency class that he brought in. They were all old. Yes. Justin Tuck, Lamar Woodley, all those guys, old. Yes, I know. I understand. Carlos Rogers, Terrell Brown, all of these guys are veterans that have been in this league and been around the block a few times. I get it. But that's not his forte. If you know anything about Reggie McKenzie and you know where he comes from the Green Bay school of hard knocks. The way they do things in Green Bay is that we don't test free agency often. In fact, we shun free agency in exchange for doing our work in the draft. That's where we build our team. That's where the core of this football team will be developed. That's where this team will be sustained, is through the draft. Well, Reggie McKenzie came from the Green Bay school of thought. So what do you expect him to do? He's going to go in and win and build this team into a winner through the draft. Well, last year I thought he had a magnificent draft. He did what he knows how to do. He went out. Every player that he drafted last year either contributed or could be a contributor moving forward. I thought it was an extremely strong draft. You look at Derek Carr, you look at Khalil Mack, you look at Gabe Jackson, you look at T.J. Carey, you look at Jelly Ellis. These are all players that the Raiders selected last year in the draft that had significant roles on this team last season. Look at Keith McGill. You look at another guy that could get some run down the road in one of your younger safeties. Look, there are a number of guys that throughout the course of the year showed why they were selected by Reggie McKenzie. And there are some guys that didn't play a lot, but the Raiders are working with them, and you'll probably see them down the road. There are a lot of players that the Raiders got in the draft last year that I think are going to be building blocks moving forward for this Raiders organization. And it was funny because Scott McCloughan, who ended up being the new GM of the Washington Redskins, was also in discussions with the Raiders. And, you know, he picked up the phone, called up Mark Davis, and he said, hey, man, I heard you guys had a vacancy. You might have been a little bit interested. And he said, yeah, if you come in here, you'll be under Reggie McKenzie working. Hello? Hello? And Scott McCloughan hung up the phone because he wasn't looking to work under anybody, but that's just the loyalty that Mark Davis has exhibited by holding on and retaining Reggie McKenzie, who I thought has done a phenomenal job in Oakland. You've got plenty of money to spend in free agency if you choose to do so this year coming up. And you've also got all of your draft picks, which in past years you wouldn't be able to say about the Oakland Raiders. Reggie McKenzie being retained as general manager, to me, a huge move for the Oakland Raiders. And sometimes it's the moves you don't make that are the best moves that you can make. And so I just think Mark Davis is doing it the right way. And I talked about him not overstepping his boundaries, not trying to pretend he's something that he's not. I don't know the most about all these guys out here. I don't know everything that there is to know about a lot of these candidates out here in this big pool of NFL, coaches that are looking for work. So he brings in John Madden to sit down in some of these interviews and talk to these guys and help him kind of decide what he should do next. And when it was all said and done, I talked about his loyalty. Well, there's never a situation where you're more loyal than to a guy that grew up a fan, family lives in the area, are season ticket holders. When you are looking for someone, when you're a franchise trying to build it from the ground up, you want someone that wants you. The worst thing to do is love someone that don't love you back. You know, what happens when love don't love you? You know, that's the worst thing in the world, is to try to go out and get a coach and really chase after a coach only to find out, I don't want to work for the Raiders. I mean, how disappointing is that? So when you go after a coach and the feeling is mutual, it's reciprocal, they want a coach for the Raiders and you want them to be the Raiders' next head coach, it's a match made in heaven. And so Jack Del Rio, who is ex-Jacksonville Jaguars head coach, who is also the ex-defensive coordinator, and more recently the ex-defensive coordinator of the Denver Broncos, now is going to be the next head coach of the Oakland Raiders. This, to me, is a really good get for the Raiders. And it's funny because, you know, you get to these press conferences and all the coaches say the same thing. This is a dream come true. I really wanted to be here. You know, this is where I wanted to be. I mean, of course, what is he going to say? But I genuinely believe that is how Jack Del Rio feels. He grew up in that area. He grew up a Raiders fan. His parents are season ticket holders. It just all feels like Jack Del Rio is coming home, and that is going to be huge for the Raiders. And the reason why I think it's huge for the Raiders is because Jack Del Rio has been around the block, an ex-player, has been, you know, a weight strength conditioning coach, has been a linebackers coach, has been a defensive coordinator, has been a head coach. He's been around the block. He knows a lot of contacts and associates, and so you expect him to be able to bring in some big names. And so I thought, right off the bat, defensive coordinator, you're probably going to get someone like Mike Smith. I was thinking Mike Smith for a defensive coordinator, and I was hearing, and at first I wasn't on board with this, but then I thought to myself, you know what? Mark Tresman would not be the worst option in the world as an offensive coordinator. You know why? He's a quarterback guru. And really, your biggest commodity right now is at the quarterback position with Derek Carr. You need Derek Carr to work out for this team, for this organization to take those steps forward that you're looking to have them take. You need Derek Carr to be your franchise quarterback and to work out. And in order to do that, you need him to be working closely with a good quarterbacks coach, more importantly, a great offensive mind at offensive coordinator that will put him in positions to succeed. And so I said to myself, Mark Tresman could be the exact right candidate for that offensive coordinator position and allow this thing to really start to fall into place. And I thought that's what Del Rio would do for you. But as we all know, and what we find out in this league is it starts at the top and works its way down. It's a league full of associates. It's a league full of guys, constituents, that they all know each other. It's a networking league. Who do you know? Who are you comfortable with? And so it always kind of goes back to guys that I've worked with in the past, that I know, that I trust. And so instead of you going out and getting a big splash offensive coordinator, you go and get Bill Musgrave. First, before I move on to your coordinators, how do I feel about this Jack Del Rio hire? I like it. I like it a lot. And so I look at this hire and I think that he can do some great things for this defense. But I look at the offensive coordinator hire of Bill Musgrave and I go, I'm not really in love with that hire, because Bill, and again, I hate to be one to harp on past track record, because guys can change, they can evolve as coordinators, but usually past coaching experience is an indicator of future results. But again, I'm not one to do that. So I'll give Bill Musgrave an opportunity to prove himself. But in Jacksonville, when Del Rio was there as the head coach, Musgrave was the offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach. He moved on to a number of stops before getting another crack at being an offensive coordinator in Minnesota. And I didn't think he did that great of a job then. Then he moved on again. In Philadelphia last year, he was their quarterbacks coach. So you're getting a guy that has worked closely with quarterbacks in the past. And so I think the thinking and the thought process there is he'll come in, he'll work closely with Derek Carr, try to get on the same page with him and get this thing going in the right direction. I've got my doubts, but I'm going to remain reserved and say that he can come in and be exactly what the Raiders need if he can do a better job than he has done in the past. You look at the defensive coordinator position, and I feel like the Raiders are dragging their feet here. I fully expected them to already have a defensive coordinator. After hiring Del Rio a while ago, you would expect them to have already gotten the ball rolling. And you don't have to rush this process at all, but I thought that Mike Smith was going to be the guy. Now it turns out that it sounds like he's not going to be the guy. Then you heard Eric Mangini could be the guy. Doesn't sound like he's going to be the guy. Now you're hearing that Del Rio might go and pluck someone from the college ranks, which, okay, I mean, if that's what you want to do, fine. We'll see what happens at defensive coordinator. That's going to be a huge move. Del Rio is definitely going to have his hand in the cookie jar when it comes to the defensive coordinator spot in terms of what they do defensively on this football team. Raiders are going to be a base 4-3 because that's what Del Rio has run throughout his career. However, you want a guy that is an extension of Del Rio, that shares the same thoughts, that they look at things the same way so that they're on the same page. I fully expect Del Rio to hire someone that has and shares the same philosophies defensively as he does. So we'll see what happens there with the defensive coordinator position. But the Raiders have made some other hires over the last couple of days. The most notable ones are offensive line coach Mike Tice. You go from one of the best teachers in the game along the offensive line in Tony Sperano to Mike Tice, another good teacher of offensive line principles. He's coming over from Atlanta. If you watch Hard Knocks, you saw him quite a bit on that program. He'll be trying to continue on what Tony Sperano built last year, which I thought was a phenomenal job. Derek Carr was not sacked a lot, and I thought they did a really good job in the run game as well. I thought the offensive line was one of the stronger units on this football team a season ago. Mike Tice will look to continue to build on that in 2015 and hopefully moving forward. Look at special teams coach Brad Seeley. He's coming over from San Francisco at the same position. So we'll see if he can have this Raiders special teams unit be better. In the past couple of years, the Raiders special teams have hurt them more than they've helped. You've had blocked punts. You've had field goals blocked. You've had returns given up, even though I think the return situation was a lot better for the Raiders last year than in past years. Still think there were breakdowns in protection, block kicks. Those things need to be cleaned up. And it'd be nice if you could get some returns. It'd be nice if you could have some trick plays on special teams work in your favor. You're hoping that Brad Seeley can come in and maybe clean up some of the deficiencies on your special teams unit. And finally, quarterback coach. I just talked about quarterback coach and how that's going to be a big deal. Todd Downing coming over from Buffalo last year. And so we'll see how he works out again. You come from Buffalo, you look at their quarterback situation last year, and you say to yourself, it wasn't that great. So we'll see what Todd Downing can do for you in that department, working closely with Derek Carr, who I said is your biggest commodity on your football team right now. As he goes, so does his team. If he flourishes, this team will be much better, much faster. If he struggles, this team will continue to struggle in Oakland. So that's where the Raiders are with their coaching situation right now. I feel like this organization is going in the right direction. Want to see who Jack Del Rio coins as his next defensive coordinator. And then I want to see how they handle the offseason. I expect them to not be huge players in free agency. They may make one or two splashes, but don't expect them to be out there throwing money around for no reason. That's not how Reggie McKenzie likes to conduct business. And I want to see how they attack the draft once again. I thought last year was a phenomenal draft. Let's see what Reggie McKenzie does for an encore there. That's going to do it for the Oakland Raiders in their coaching search. Continue to join me as I run through all the teams who have made coaching changes in 2014 and into the 2015 year. We will continue to break all things down in the National Football League. What happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Come back and join me as I continue to break down anything the National Football League season. Big as the Coaching Search Series rolls on.
In the lab.